Today's lesson is Lesson 4 in Chapter 3, and it's on Later Peoples of the Fertile Crescent. And what you're seeing in the picture is called the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. So the big idea, after the Sumerians, many cultures ruled parts of the Fertile Crescent. The Babylonians conquered Mesopotamia, and they created a code of law. Invasions of Mesopotamia changed the region's culture, and Phoenicians built a trading society in the eastern Mediterranean region. So, remember, Sargon was the first king that created an empire, or that we know of. And there were some after him, but Hammurabi is well known. He was the king of Babylon. And Babylon wasn't necessarily the nicest place. But during his rule, Babylon became the most important city in Mesopotamia. He developed what he called Hammurabi's Code. It was a set of 282 laws that he created, which dealt with almost every part of daily life. If you've ever heard the expression, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, a lot of people think that it comes from the Bible, but it doesn't. It comes from Hammurabi's Code, way back in ancient Babylon. So a little bit about Hammurabi. Of course, he was Babylon's king, and he was the city's greatest monarch. And a monarch is the ruler of a kingdom or empire. He was a brilliant war leader who brought all of Mesopotamia into his Babylonian empire. He oversaw building and irrigation projects, and he improved the tax system. And of course, he developed Hammurabi's Code, which was the set of laws that was, as far as we know, was the first laws that were written down for all to see. So you couldn't say, well, I didn't know what the law was when you broke it. So these 280 laws that were in Hammurabi's Code contained some of the ideas that we still find in laws today. Specific crimes brought specific penalties, like an eye for an eye. Social class was taken into account. Remember our social hierarchy that we talked about. It was a greater crime to injure a rich man than to injure a poor man. And this was in their society. It was unique not only because of how thorough it was, but also, again, because he wrote it down for all to see. It was carved into a stone in the center of the city. So you're going to come back and watch this video about Hammurabi's Code. Here's a depiction of Hammurabi, and here are just a few of his codes. If a man put the eye of another man, put out the eye of another man, his eye shall be put out. So eye for eye, tooth for tooth. If he break another man's bone, his bone shall be broken. If a physician heal the broken bone or diseased soft part of the man, the patient shall pay the physician 5 shekels in money. If he were a freedman, he shall pay 3 shekels. If he were a slave, or his owner shall pay the physician 2 shekels. So you can see just how detailed it was, and when you watch the video, you'll have more explanation of that. So the different invasions of Mesopotamia also changed the region's culture. Different armies battled for control of the fertile land. Remember, you've got to feed your people. This is very important. So fertile land was what they fought for. Different peoples who came into Mesopotamia and took over and ruled at one time or another. You had the Hittites, the Kassites, the Assyrians, and the Chaldeans. And each time a new group came in and took over, it of course affected the culture of the region because they brought their culture with them and kind of mixed and blended it all together. The Hittites were the first to master ironworking. So they had the strongest weapons of the time. They used a chariot, which is a wheeled horse-drawn cart, which allowed them to move quickly around the battlefield. They were then taken over by the Kassites after the Hittites' king was assassinated. And then the Kassites ruled for almost 400 years. Enter the Assyrians. They had a strong army. They also used chariots, and they had iron weapons. They did something a little different, though. Before they would actually go in and fight the battle, they would spread terror before that event. They would loot the villages and they would burn the crops. Again, we see where crops were very important. The Assyrian kings ruled their empire through local leaders, who each of those governed a small area. So you kind of think about that like governors of today, like the governor of Tennessee, and each state has their own governor. The local leaders in the Assyrian Empire demanded heavy taxes. That means they taxed them a lot. So in the gold, you see the Babylonian Empire, and this was around 1750 BC or BCE. And the pink, you see the Assyrian Empire, which would have been around 650 BC. Now we have the Chaldeans. They attacked the Assyrians when they were weak and destroyed their empire. If you've ever heard of King Nebuchadnezzar, this is where he comes from. He built Babylon into a beautiful city that had the famous hanging gardens. That's the picture that you saw at the very beginning. The Babylonians admired the Sumerian culture. They studied their language, and they even built temples to Sumerian gods. Babylon eventually became a center for astronomy. And this is a video you'll watch about King Nebuchadnezzar. We had a group of people called the Phoenicians. Think about what we have in our world today. How did we learn to read? What's it called? Normally, most people learn to read by phonics. You sound the words out. This came from the Phoenicians. They built a trading society in the eastern Mediterranean region. They had huge cedar trees that they used for timber, and they could build boats from these huge trees so they could access the sea and trade, which made them important, made them rich. And they're also known for building great harbors. This expansion of trade, the Phoenicians sailed the ships around the Mediterranean Sea, and along the way they founded several new colonies along the trade routes, which allowed them to become wealthy. Here you can see in the red lines all the trade routes to where the Phoenicians traveled. And this shows you Phoenicia around 800 BC, BCE. And then in the gold, you can see all of the settlements that were formed, and the little red dots indicate Phoenician colonies. They developed, as I said before, very similar to our modern day alphabet. And they did this so they could record their activities. This made writing much easier for everyone. No more the cuneiform where you just had the clay stylus or the clay tablet and the stylus, and you had to do all those different lines and symbols. And as I said, it is the basis for the English language. So this ends lesson 4. Tomorrow you're going to watch the video Daniel in the Lion's Den. That will give you a closer look at King Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians. And the slide after that contains Rakshak and Benny, which will be on Monday. And then the final slide will be next Tuesday, and it has the time compass of Mesopotamia that will put everything together before we do our study guide and take our test. So I'm just going to show you the next slides that you will be watching the videos from in the coming days. And then here you'll see on the last side is the link to the Time Compass Mesopotamia video.